My beloved child, a silence has just begun to speak, and if you listen closely, you will understand why some moments change hearts without anyone raising their voice. Stay till the end, because something important is waiting for you, and it is arriving one quiet heartbeat at a time. There was no dramatic entrance, no unexpected interruption, only a room filled with people carrying thoughts they had never dared to say aloud. Every glance seemed ordinary until one sentence slipped into the air with a calmness that no one expected. He looked around for only a brief moment, then lowered his eyes as though the truth had become too precious to hide any longer. His voice was gentle, almost trembling with honesty, and then he whispered the words that no one believed they would ever hear. She was never you. Nothing moved after that. Even time itself seemed to pause, allowing those words to settle into every corner of the room. The second party, who had spent so long believing appearances instead of feelings, suddenly realized that comparison had never been the real story. Tears quietly gathered, not because of defeat, but because the illusion they had been holding onto had finally dissolved. Sometimes people cry when they lose something, but sometimes they cry because they finally understand something they had been unable to see before. That was the kind of silence filling the room now. No one rushed to explain. No one tried to argue. The truth required no defense. It simply existed. And perhaps this is why your own heart has been searching for answers that never arrived through loud promises. Real feelings rarely compete for attention. They reveal themselves when everything else grows quiet. Don't skip, because what happened next revealed that those simple words carried a meaning far greater than anyone imagined. The sentence was not about rejecting one person or choosing another. It was about recognizing a connection that could never be replaced by convenience or circumstance. In that moment, hidden emotions surfaced without anyone needing to announce them. Faces changed. Eyes softened. Even those who believed they understood the entire story realized they had only been watching the surface. The room had fallen silent for one reason alone: everyone had just witnessed honesty arrive without warning. Yet the deepest revelation had not even been spoken. While everyone remained frozen in that unforgettable moment, one unexpected confession was still waiting inside a heart that had stayed silent for far too long, and when those words finally emerge, everything you thought this story was about will begin to look completely different. A quiet realization began unfolding before anyone could gather the right words, and strangely, it was not the person who had spoken first who captured every heart, it was the one who had remained completely silent. Until now. There is a kind of silence that hides uncertainty, and there is another that protects something too meaningful to rush. This was the second kind. Don't skip, because what happened in the next few moments revealed that emotions often become clearest after the room has already stopped reacting. The second party slowly lifted their eyes, still glistening with tears that had nothing to do with embarrassment and everything to do with understanding. It was as though every assumption they had carried for so long was gently dissolving, leaving behind only one undeniable truth. They finally understood that they had never been competing with another person. They had been standing beside a memory that could never be recreated, a connection that had quietly continued to live even when no one could see it. Across the room, no one interrupted. Some looked toward the floor, while others watched him with a quiet curiosity that words could never satisfy. He did not rush to explain himself. He allowed the silence to complete what his sentence had started. Sometimes the strongest message is not found in what is added, but in what no longer needs to be defended. His calm expression carried the weight of someone who had finally stopped pretending to himself. Every choice he had made, every conversation he had avoided, every smile that never reached his heart suddenly made sense. The room was no longer filled with questions about the past. It had become a place where hidden honesty was beginning to breathe. Perhaps you have experienced something similar without even realizing it. There are moments when someone finally speaks the truth you have quietly felt all along, and instead of feeling shocked, you feel peaceful. That peace is not coincidence. It is the feeling that arrives when confusion finally steps aside. Stay till the end, because something important is waiting for you. The story is no longer about who was present in that room. It is becoming a story about what the heart refuses to forget, even after time has tried to rewrite it. Then, just when everyone believed the most meaningful words had already been spoken, a soft voice came from the far corner of the room. It belonged to the one person no one expected to speak. They looked directly at him and asked a single question, gentle, sincere, impossible to ignore. He closed his eyes for a brief moment before answering, because the reply carried a truth he had hidden from everyone, including himself. The room became even quieter, knowing that whatever came next would reveal why those simple words, "She was never you," were only the beginning of a much deeper story. From the farthest corner, where no one had expected another voice to rise, a simple question drifted through the stillness with remarkable gentleness. It was not asked to challenge him. It was asked because everyone could sense there was one final piece of the story that had never been spoken aloud. Every eye turned toward him, yet he did not answer immediately. He smiled softly, not with certainty, but with the quiet relief of someone who no longer wished to hide behind unfinished sentences. Don't skip, because something important is waiting for you, and this moment reveals why truth often arrives one careful step at a time. He took a slow breath before saying, "People believed I was trying to replace what I had lost, but I was only trying to understand what my heart had been protecting all along." The room remained completely still. Those words did not accuse anyone. They simply uncovered what had always been there beneath every misunderstanding. The second party lowered their head again, but this time the tears carried a different meaning. They were no longer tears of confusion. They were the quiet release that comes when a long search finally reaches its destination. Sometimes the greatest surprise is discovering that no one was truly standing against you. They were simply walking through their own unanswered questions. One by one, the expressions around the room began to soften. Someone who had once defended every assumption now realized how easily appearances can shape a story that the heart never intended to tell. Another person quietly remembered conversations that had seemed ordinary at the time but now revealed a completely different meaning. It was as though invisible pieces of a puzzle had suddenly found where they belonged. No dramatic announcement was needed. Understanding itself became the loudest voice in the room. Perhaps this is why certain memories continue to return to you. Not because they are asking to be repeated, but because they still contain a lesson that has not fully unfolded. There are connections that remain meaningful not through constant words, but through quiet consistency. They wait patiently until the right moment arrives, when every misunderstanding has become gentle enough to let the truth be seen. Stay till the end, because what follows is not another surprise, it is a realization that changes the meaning of everything that came before. Then, just as everyone believed the conversation had finally reached its end, he reached into his pocket and carefully unfolded a small piece of paper that had been with him the entire time. It was worn from being opened again and again, as though it had traveled with him through countless silent days. He looked at it for only a moment before saying, "I wrote these words long before anyone knew how this story would unfold." The room leaned closer without moving, because somehow they already knew that whatever was written on that page would explain why he could never honestly say anything other than, "She was never you." Without warning, the atmosphere changed again, not because someone interrupted, but because everyone sensed that the folded page in his hands carried far more than ink. It had become a quiet witness to feelings that had never asked for attention. He held it carefully, almost as though unfolding it too quickly would disturb the meaning it had protected for so long. "Don't skip, something important is waiting for you," because this was the moment when silence and honesty finally began walking together. He looked at the page for a few seconds before reading the first line. "If the day ever comes when people ask me why I could never pretend, I hope they understand that the heart recognizes what the eyes cannot always explain." No one spoke. Even those who had arrived believing they already knew the entire story suddenly realized they had only known fragments. The letter did not mention blame. It did not compare one person to another. Instead, it revealed something far more meaningful: that genuine affection cannot be measured by how loudly it is expressed, but by how faithfully it remains, even when no one is watching. The second party quietly covered their face, not to hide from anyone, but to collect emotions that had become impossible to ignore. They remembered moments they had overlooked, conversations they had misunderstood, and small gestures that now carried an entirely different meaning. One sentence echoed again and again inside their heart: "She was never you." It was no longer a comparison. It had become a recognition that every soul leaves a different imprint, and some connections simply cannot be recreated by trying harder or waiting longer. Around the room, the atmosphere softened in a way no one expected. A person who had remained silent from the very beginning finally whispered, "Now I understand." Those 4 words carried remarkable weight because they came from someone who had spent the longest time believing the opposite. Sometimes the greatest transformation does not happen when someone changes your mind. It happens when your own heart quietly opens a door that had been closed for far too long. Perhaps this message has found you for a reason. Have you ever wondered why certain people continue to return to your thoughts, even after life has moved forward? Not because the past is calling you back, but because some truths arrive only when you are ready to receive them. They cannot be rushed. They cannot be forced. They simply wait with extraordinary patience until understanding becomes stronger than assumption. Stay till the end, because the story has not yet revealed its deepest moment. As he lowered the letter, everyone believed they had finally heard everything worth saying. But then he turned the page over. On the back, written in smaller handwriting that no one had noticed before, was one final message. He smiled quietly as his eyes rested on those words, and before reading them aloud, he said, "This is the part one never thought anyone would hear." The room became still once again, knowing that the next sentence would reveal why that letter had remained hidden until this very day. A gentle breath escaped him before a single word left his lips, as though even the letter had been waiting for permission to finish the story it had carried in silence. No one leaned forward, yet everyone felt closer than before. The room had reached that rare moment when curiosity no longer came from excitement alone, it came from the hope that truth, when spoken with kindness, could finally bring peace to every heart listening. Stay till the end, because something important is waiting for you, and it has been quietly growing since the very first sentence. He turned the page and read the final lines with remarkable calm. "If one day you see me smiling beside someone else, do not believe the smile tells the whole story. A smile can be shared with many people, but a place in the heart is never created twice." The words settled gently into the silence, and no one rushed to interpret them. They did not need to. Every person in the room understood them in a different way, yet every understanding led to the same realization. Some bonds are not louder than others, they are simply deeper. The second party closed their eyes for a moment. The tears had almost stopped now, replaced by a quiet acceptance that felt strangely comforting. They finally understood why every attempt to compare had always felt incomplete. It was never about being better or worse. It was about being different. Every person carries a unique light, and no amount of imitation can replace authenticity. That realization did not create distance. Instead, it created compassion. For the first time, they were no longer asking, "Why wasn't it me?" They were gently asking, "What can I learn from this moment?" He folded the letter once more and held it close, not because he wished to hide it again, but because its purpose had finally been fulfilled. The words no longer belonged only to the page. They had become part of everyone who had heard them. One by one, people who had arrived carrying opinions quietly laid those opinions aside. The room no longer felt divided. It felt united by something much simpler, an appreciation for honesty that had arrived without bitterness and without blame. Perhaps your own life has held moments like this. Times when you searched for answers in grand gestures, only to discover that the deepest truth had been hidden inside the smallest sentence. Sometimes a single honest phrase becomes the key that unlocks years of uncertainty. Not because it changes the past, but because it changes the way you carry it forward. Don't skip, because the next moment reveals that this story was never only about the people inside that room. It has always been quietly reflecting something inside you as well. Just as everyone believed the gathering had finally come to its natural close, a phone resting silently on the nearby table lit up. No one had touched it. A new message had appeared on the screen. He glanced at it, and the warmth in his expression changed into quiet amazement. Without reading it aloud, he whispered, "I never expected these words today." The room grew still once again, because somehow everyone knew that the message waiting on that screen would connect every unanswered moment from the beginning of this story in a way no one could have imagined. The glow from the phone was small, yet somehow it became the brightest thing in the room. No one asked whose message it was. No one dared to interrupt the quiet anticipation that had settled over every heart. He looked at the screen for a long moment before allowing the faintest smile to appear. It was not the smile of surprise alone. It was the smile of someone realizing that life had quietly completed a circle he never thought would close. Stay till the end, because something important is waiting for you, and this unexpected message carried a meaning no one had prepared for. He finally spoke, his voice softer than before. It says, "Thank you for finally telling the truth. Now everyone can stop carrying a story that never belonged to them." The room remained perfectly still. Those words did not point fingers. They did not reopen old misunderstandings. Instead, they gently released everyone from the weight of assumptions they had unknowingly carried. Sometimes the greatest gift is not receiving an answer. It is discovering that the answer was always simpler than the questions we created around it. The second party slowly wiped away the last trace of tears. For the first time since the gathering had begun, their expression was peaceful. They looked toward him, not with disappointment, but with genuine understanding. They realized that affection cannot be borrowed, repeated, or exchanged. Every connection carries its own quiet language, and the heart always recognizes the voice that was meant for it. "She was never you" no longer sounded like a painful sentence. It had become a reminder that every person has a place no one else can occupy. A gentle conversation began to unfold around the room. People who had once believed they understood everything started sharing moments they had overlooked. One remembered how he always became quieter whenever her name was mentioned. Another recalled how he had never spoken negatively about anyone, even when he could have easily defended himself. Piece by piece, those forgotten memories formed a picture no one had been able to see before. Truth had not arrived all at once. It had revealed itself through patience. Perhaps this is where your own journey quietly meets this story. Have you ever noticed how certain answers only become visible after you stop chasing them? The heart has an extraordinary way of revealing what matters most when it is no longer trying to prove anything. Real connections rarely demand attention. They simply remain, steady and sincere, waiting for the right season to be understood. Don't skip, because the next realization may feel as though it has been waiting specifically for you. As everyone prepared to leave, an elderly woman who had remained silent throughout the entire gathering gently stood up. She walked toward him with calm, unhurried steps and placed her hand over the folded letter. Looking into his eyes, she smiled with remarkable warmth and quietly said, "Your words were honest, but there is one truth you still haven't spoken." Every conversation stopped again. He looked at her with quiet surprise, because somehow she had uncovered the one feeling he believed no one would ever recognize. He took another slow breath, knowing that what he was about to admit next would reveal the deepest reason behind every choice he had made from the very beginning. The room seemed to grow even quieter after her gentle words, not because anyone was searching for another dramatic revelation, but because everyone sensed that the deepest truth is often the last one to find its voice. He lowered his eyes, holding the folded letter a little closer, as though it had become a bridge between the person he once was and the person he was finally ready to become. "Don't skip, something important is waiting for you, because this confession was never meant to impress anyone. It was meant to set every heart in that room free." For a long moment he said nothing. Then, with remarkable calm, he finally spoke. The hardest truth was never that she was different. The hardest truth was that I spent too much time believing I had to hide what I already knew. Those words floated gently through the silence, touching every listener in a different way. No one interrupted him. There was nothing left to challenge. Honesty had become stronger than explanation. The elderly woman smiled with quiet understanding. "That is what I hoped you would say," she whispered. "Because when people stop hiding from their own hearts, they stop asking the world to decide what only they can feel." Her words settled softly over the room like the first light of morning. Faces that had once carried uncertainty now reflected peace. Even those who had arrived expecting conflict realized they had witnessed something far more meaningful, a moment when truth was spoken without pride and received without resentment. The second party slowly stepped forward. There was no trace of comparison left in their expression. Instead, there was gratitude. They looked at him with calm eyes and said, "Now I understand why nothing ever felt complete. I wasn't searching for your answer. I was searching for my own." A gentle smile appeared across the room. It was the kind of smile that comes when people finally stop measuring themselves against someone else's story. Perhaps this is the lesson quietly waiting inside your own journey. Sometimes life allows unanswered questions to remain, not because they are meant to trouble you, but because they are preparing you to recognize the answer when it finally arrives. Until then, every delay, every pause, every unexpected silence is shaping a heart that will appreciate truth instead of rushing past it. Stay till the end, because what comes next will reveal that this story has never been about winning someone's place. It has always been about discovering the place that was already waiting for you. As people began gathering their things, believing the evening had reached its peaceful conclusion, someone noticed another folded paper resting beneath the chair where he had been sitting all along. It had been there from the very beginning, unseen by everyone. He looked at it with genuine surprise before quietly picking it up. Across the front, written in familiar handwriting, were just 7 simple words. "I knew you would tell them, eventually." The smile on his face faded into thoughtful wonder, because only one person could have written those words and no one in the room had seen that person arrive. No one reached for the note. No one even whispered a guess. The room had learned something precious that evening, that the deepest truths lose their beauty when they are hurried. He held the folded paper gently between his fingers, studying the familiar handwriting as though it carried the echo of a voice he had not heard in a very long time. "Don't skip, because something important is waiting for you," and this quiet discovery would reveal that some messages arrive exactly when the heart is finally ready to understand them. He unfolded the paper with slow, careful movements. The first line was so simple that several people almost missed its significance. "If you are reading this, then you finally chose honesty over fear." He paused for a moment, allowing those words to settle before continuing. "I never needed you to explain yourself to the world. I only hoped one day you would stop explaining yourself to your own heart." A gentle wave of emotion moved through the room. No one felt overwhelmed. Instead, they felt lighter. It was as if every person listening had quietly remembered a moment when they, too, had hidden their real feelings behind polite smiles or comfortable silence. The message was no longer about one relationship. It had become a mirror reflecting something deeply human: the quiet courage it takes to be genuine. The second party looked toward him with peaceful eyes and softly said, "Now I understand why those words stayed with you all this time." He nodded. "They weren't simply words," he replied. "They became a promise that I would never speak from fear again." For the first time since the gathering had begun, there was no uncertainty left in his voice. Only gratitude. The elderly woman smiled warmly before adding, "People often believe life changes through extraordinary moments. But more often, it changes when one honest sentence finally reaches the heart that has been waiting for it." Her words were met with quiet agreement. Around the room, people exchanged gentle smiles, not because every question had been answered, but because they had discovered that peace does not always come from knowing everything. Sometimes it comes from finally accepting what has always been true. Perhaps this is why this story has found you today. There may be something within your own life that has been patiently waiting for your attention. Not demanding it. Not chasing it. Simply waiting with quiet confidence until the right moment arrives. Real clarity never forces its way into your heart. It arrives gently, often disguised as an ordinary conversation that unexpectedly changes everything. Just as everyone prepared to leave for the final time, the door opened with a soft creak. No dramatic entrance followed. A single person stepped inside carrying nothing except a calm expression and a small wooden box tied with a pale ribbon. They looked directly at him, smiled with unmistakable familiarity, and quietly said, "I believe this belongs to you now." He stared at the box in complete silence. Because he had not seen it in years. And somehow, he already knew what was waiting inside.